All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. These live streams are designed for people who are thinking about buying in New York City and want some information on being a buyer. And we always choose a specific topic to talk about, but certainly in the chat, you can ask any kind of questions that you want, and hopefully I'll have the answer for you. But today's topic, we're going to talk specifically about down payments because the down payments are often the biggest hurdle that people have to go through when they're buying in New York City. New York City is a complicated process, and it's certainly you need to be prepared financially, but that down payment is one of the first steps, and a lot of people coming to the city are very surprised about the process of the down payments. The thing to remember and to know about down payments is that the individual buildings are the ones that determine the down payment amount, not your bank. And that's very different from just about every other market out in the United States. Very different there. So you need to know that in general, in condos, you're going to need to put about 10% down, but if you're looking at a co-op, the co-op buildings get to determine how much that you put down. So in general, it's 20%, but in many buildings, it could be 25%, it could be 30%, even up to 40%. So whenever you're looking at certain buildings, you'll need to determine how much financing that building allows. So your broker may come back and say, hey, this building only allows 70% financing, which means you will have to put 30% down in order to buy into that building. So it's an important piece of strategy that you must consider before really you go out and start looking for any apartments. Because if you don't have a down payment for that particular building, then you're just not going to qualify to be able to buy into that building. So, again, in general, 10% for condos. I have had a few buildings that require a little bit more, but 10% for condos, starting at 20% and usually going up for co-ops. Okay, we've got some questions coming in, and I also have some questions that were submitted to me. So I'm going to put on my glasses here. Let me look at the first one here. My bank has a special deal for first-time home buyers. Can I use that? That is a question that I get asked so many times. And again, it's usually from people that are moving into New York City for the first time and don't understand the market. The banks cannot determine your down payment. So that's an unfortunate thing because you may be a highly qualified client and you may qualify for something really low, like a low down payment, 3%, because you are a first time home buyer, but it's the buildings that determine how much you must put down, not the bank. So, unfortunately, a lot of those first time homebuyer programs for down payments don't work. Now, there are other things, other programs that you can take advantage of with your bank. Perhaps they'll uh, help finance your closing costs. Perhaps they will offer some sort of buy down or some sort of interest rate reduction. All of those things, you're dealing with your mortgage, you can certainly work on those. But in terms of the down payment, you can't take advantage of that. I did have one deal a while ago who came in. It was a physician's loan, and they had a zero down payment loan there, and they were approved and they were a good client. But out of all of Manhattan, we found one person that was willing to deal with one building, and it was a sponsor unit, and meaning that there was not a board involved. And it just so happened that that sponsor was willing to consider it. The deal did not go through because in the end he just felt like it was too risky. But that was just one out of the thousands and thousands of apartments for sale. So not those kinds of programs just are not usable here in the city. You must look at the down payments in the buildings and how much they're gonna ask, and that's how much you'll need to pay. Can my parents help me with the down payment or to buy the apartment? That's a great question. And the answer is it depends. It depends. Once again, I sound like a broken record, but going back to the building itself, it really depends on what the building allows, particularly with co ops, because you're buying shares in a company that owns that building, the shareholder owned company that owns the building. You really have to understand that the boards make their own rules. So you may have three buildings in a row, and the three buildings are very similar, but those three buildings have three different boards, and each of those buildings may have a different set of rules. So some buildings allow what's called gifting, which means that you can receive financial gifts from people, and you can certainly use those. Some people allow parental purchasing, and some people allow co purchasing. Right? Some buildings allow co purchasing. So, those are three different categories. And some buildings may allow gifting and parental purchasing. Some buildings may allow parental purchasing and co purchasing, but not gifting because they want secure, financially secure shareholders coming in. So, it really depends once again on the building. You need to come to the table with that criteria, right? Whomever you're working with needs to understand that in order to be able to buy, you need to have some parental help, whether that's co purchasing or gifting. And that way, again, we can create a strategy to make sure that whatever buildings you're looking at are the appropriate buildings that will accept that. Now, sometimes when you're going through the co op process and the co op application, there may be other financial criteria that you just may not meet because of that. So, we really do have to look at a full financial profile and understand that financial profile to sort of put the pieces of the puzzle together and help you match to buildings that will let you buy into those buildings. The criteria is completely different in New York City than it does is for other markets. Okay, we've got a question coming in here. Why are down payments so high? Well, that's an excellent question. Um, why are the down payments so high? Well, first off, you're buying into one of the most expensive markets in the United States and actually in the world. So your price, your cost of buying into that market is naturally going to be higher. So our entry level apartment is $1 million in New York City. Doesn't mean that you're going to have to spend $1 million. You can certainly find apartments for 500, 600, but it's just a higher end market. So the costs are going to be higher. Secondly, especially we have so many co-op buildings in New York City, and co-ops are designed to create a community. Right. We don't really have a lot of flipping of apartments in New York City. People don't buy and then renovate and, a month later try to sell because of the structure of the co-op. So co-ops want to make sure that the people coming into the shareholder owned corporation are financially secure and are going to be part of that community, a good shareholder in that community. And so the more equity that people have in that building or in that unit uh, tends to dictate how quickly they move. If you have someone who just comes in and has 3% equity, then they may get out pretty quickly. But if you have someone coming in and you have 20, 25%, 30% equity, data shows that they tend to stick around. And that's really what co ops want because co ops thrive on security within the company and security within the building. So those are a couple of reasons why the down payments are higher. Again, I fully understand because I work with so many clients that that is often a barrier to entry, but understanding this up front will certainly help you plan for the future. So if you're not ready to buy now, you can certainly think about buying in the future. All right. Um, Oh, this is from a New Yorker. Are there any city programs to help? Yes and no. I did a deal last year with a down payment assistance program from the city, and it was just very, very difficult. The co-op did not like it, did not like that the buyer was using it. They didn't understand it. It wasn't terribly well explained, and the sources from the city were difficult to deal with. And so The answer is technically yes, but the practical answer is they're difficult to implement, difficult to use, and my experience is that co-ops just aren't responding well to them. So that's a great question for anyone who lives in New York City. Here's another one. My bank is saying 3% down. I kind of talked about that earlier. Look, your bank can say anything they want to, but it does not apply to the down payments in New York City, right? It's just the buildings, the individual buildings get to dictate what you must put down. What that question says to me is that if your bank is saying 3%, 3%, we don't understand why. They don't understand the New York City market. And one of the biggest pieces of advice I give is work with a bank or a mortgage broker that actually works in the New York City market because they're going to understand the co-op structure and they're going to understand the condo structure and you're going to have a much smoother deal. If a bank is coming back to you and say, "Hey, 3% down," and approving you just for the mortgage, then they're not understanding the structure of a co-op and they're not approving you based on your mortgage and your maintenance payments, which must be considered, and they're not understanding the down payment process in New York City. So, big tip: don't work with banks that really aren't New York City based. Um, can you negotiate the down payment, particularly if you're a highly qualified buyer? The answer to that is no. Unfortunately not. The rules apply to everyone. If a co-op board has a 20% rule, 20% down rule, then they require 20% down. The exception may be if you're buying a sponsor unit. A sponsor unit means that the original owner who was the original owner of the building still owns the apartment, and they're probably selling that, and you don't have to go through a board uh, approval process. Maybe, but that would be very, very rare for that to happen. It's like I said, on that physician's loan where they had a zero down payment um, option or approval. We could only find that one sponsor in all of Manhattan that would even consider it, and it still didn't go through. So that's not negotiable. There are lots and lots of other things that are negotiable in the New York City real estate market, but down payments are not one of them. On the flip side, again, building equity, if you can put that 20 or 30% down, you already have some good equity that once you sell is going to come back to you, so that's a good thing, as opposed to just 3%. And obviously it's going to affect your mortgage payment. Your mortgage payment will be lower because you'll be putting more down, which with high prices of rent in New York City compared to what you would pay for a mortgage, getting a lower mortgage is ultimately a really, really good thing because it's going to make living in New York City much more livable. I went through that process, right? So whenever I bought my co-op, I think about 15 years ago now, it changed my life, quite honestly, because it provided stability for me. I wasn't having to worry about my rent going up every year or being priced out of the market or having to move. Which people in New York City move around a lot. So it provided stability, it provided equity for me, but having that stable payment was a really big deal for me after having rented for many, many years. Okay, I think that looks like all the questions that were coming through. So I hope that this was helpful. We're going to be doing this. I'm going to be doing this quite often with some of these live streams to answer all of your questions. Please take a moment to subscribe to the channel so that you'll know when the live streams are coming up. And we do release videos every week about various topics on buying in New York City, including market updates and including inventory updates, and then just general knowledge. So a lot of what we're talking about here, I'm sure you will find one of our videos helpful that goes into a little bit more depth about buying in the New York City market. And again, thanks so much for attending. This was a good turnout and had some good questions on down payments. And I'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.